Good morning, guys. So, I'm sorry if I've been away in the last few days. I've been away in my house, but I didn't go anywhere else. I was busy trying to work out video editing. Turns out it was a waste of time because I can't do it. Anyway, let's go back to more interesting stuff. And for today, this is what I will be showing you. It's a Japanese-inspired gouache painting. Yes, gouache. What is it? Gouache paint. This is what it might look like. It's a particular type of paint which I would place in between watercolour and acrylic paint. The name gouache comes from the Italian word guazzo, which means splash. Now, watercolour paint is quite transparent, generally speaking. What does that mean? It means that if you apply one layer of a watercolour paint on top of a dry layer of watercolour paint, you can see underneath. Perhaps I would show you in a video. I will show you an example in a video. And acrylic paint, usually it's more opaque, which means it provides a better coverage, although it's not always the case. Like, for example, some yellow are quite transparent, but that's the general rule. Now, you do not need to get acrylic gouache paint for this painting. You can use watercolor, and if you have white acrylic paint, it will be fantastic for the highlights of our Japanese flowers. Okay, so this is what we're going to paint today. I'm not sure if you can see, but I have used some white for the highlights here. I will show you everything in the video. Also, remember, in one of my first videos I've uploaded on YouTube, I was showing you the type of material we will need. So, and that includes this type of brushes. Yes, I bought this from the Works for £3. They're quite good. Remember, always wash your brushes when you finish, okay, with a little bit of soap, warm water, and just gently wash your bristles until you don't see any more paint coming out. Dry it when you finish and try to put it back to shape, okay. So why these brushes are useful? Because you can easily paint the shape of the leaves of your flower, and with a small brushes, you can also paint these beautiful outlines. Okay, so I will show you everything in a video coming up. Now, get your paint ready. So let's start. I'm using some yellow ochre, which is that brownish yellow and blue, and loads of water, and I'm making a very thin wash. By the way, make sure it's very thin, watery, and it's dry before you start painting on top. Okay, so next we have some red, brown, yellow ochre, and blue, and we're going to start by mixing a grey. You can use some white, blue, and yellow ochre. And make sure that you know where the flowers should be positioned before you start, one on the top left and one on the bottom left. Now, I will be also leaving a link which you can download in the description of my video, so you can print out or download the original picture so you can have an idea what to do, okay? One of my main advice will be to try not to overcomplicate this and keep it as simple as possible. Perhaps you can practice your line making with your brush before you start. You don't need to spend an hour, just a couple of minutes practicing with your round brushes, and see how you can make those wriggly lines. As you can see, it's just lots of wriggly lines really at the moment. You just have to know where you where you're going to place them. Okay, this is quite important. They can't just be randomly applied everywhere. If you don't like these colors, you can try and use other colors, but I would stick to 4 or 5. In my painting palette on the right hand side, you can't see blue unfortunately, but I have blue, yellow ochre, yellow, and the top color that you see on the top right is called English red, but it's basically brown with added red. Okay, so perhaps with your watercolor palette you can use a mixture of pre-mixed brown and red, yellow ochre. Usually you should have yellow ochre on your watercolor palette, or you can just add brown to your yellow. You can also use some normal yellow and blue and white, of course. Can you see how I'm using now my brush to create distinct patterns for my leaves? I also suggest you try and do this before you start your painting. Try and do some warm-up exercises. And I have achieved this green for the flowers by mixing some blue, a little bit of white, not too much, yellow ochre, and a tiny bit of normal yellow. If you don't like yellow ochre, you can just use normal yellow, but I quite like it. I quite like using yellow ochre. So I would, one of my suggestions is do not overcomplicate this. And also, when you use your brush, don't press too hard. Remember, only the tip of the brush should be touching the paper, because otherwise it's going to be quite difficult for you to control it. Okay, so let's carry on and adding more details on the background. So I am not using a very dark green. I mean, I will have to go back and add some details of the leaves when it's dried, so I will need a darker green. This is why I'm not going too dark at this stage. You will see later on anyway. Okay, so once we have finished with our leaves and all of our green areas, although it looks quite like a green, like a greyish green, you can make it more colorful if you want to. Next, what we need to do, we need to mix our English red, or just red and brown, and we're just going to add a little bit of round shapes in the background, which should indicate more flowers, but we don't want to be too detailed. It's just, it should complement the painting. It shouldn't really take away the attention from our main subject, which are the two flowers, Japanese flowers. Sorry about my head, again, trying to work out how to take better videos. If you have any advice, by the way, please let me know. Now I am mixing some white for my highlight. It's a shame that you can't see it very well, but I'm just applying the white near the outlines for my flowers. Make sure that the grey outlines are dried before you apply your white, otherwise it might turn into disaster, because the two color will start to mix together, and then your white is not going to look white anymore. And for this I have used acrylic paint, because even if you have white on your watercolor set, it's never a very good white. It's always quite transparent, so it doesn't provide much coverage. Also, it's important that you do a very light wash of neutral color underneath, otherwise there's no point applying white paint on your highlight, because you're not going to be able to see it. Now I'm using just a bit more of like a lighter green on some areas of my leaves. You can do that if you want to, it's not compulsory. And I'm also using a very light grey to just add more details to my red flowers. Now, let's see, with my dark green, as I was telling you before, I'm just going over because I want to add more details to my leaves. Remember, you don't have to describe these details in every single leaf. Just keep it quite generic. You don't want to take away the focal point from your flowers, so don't overcomplicate it and keep it simple, okay? I'm really looking forward to see pictures of your paintings. In the last few days, I've received many of your pictures and painting of your works, and I'm so impressed. Now, I'm going to remove my masking tape, and voila! Thank you, guys!